The crystal chamber hummed with the collective murmur of a dozen species, each representative seated according to their civilization's age and perceived wisdom. At the center of the Galactic Council's most sacred meeting hall, Counselor Prime, Vex of the ancient Korthak Empire, reviewed the data tablet with barely concealed amusement. So, Vex's voice resonated through the translation matrix, reaching every delegate in their native tongue. The primitive bipeds of the third planet have finally achieved basic faster-than-light travel. His mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his kind. How quaint. Counselor Thane, whose crystalline form refracted the chamber's ambient light into rainbow patterns, chimed with harmonic skepticism. The species calls itself human, according to our deep space monitors. They've been broadcasting electromagnetic signals for barely 2 of their centuries. Their technology is crude, their society fractured into competing nation-states. Typical, interjected Counselor Brix, her tentacles weaving complex patterns that expressed diplomatic disdain. Another young species drunk on their first taste of interstellar capability. Remember the Valdorian Confederacy? They thought their plasma cannons made them galactic powers, too. The assembled council rippled with shared amusement. The Valdorians had been reduced to a client state within a single solar cycle. Their aggressive expansion curbed through a combination of economic pressure and a few strategic demonstrations of superior firepower. Or the Nexian Horde, added Counselor Grimm, his voice a gravelly bass that seemed to emanate from the very walls. They conquered 12 systems before we introduced them to proper civilization. Now they mine asteroids for our industrial complexes, grateful for the privilege. Counselor Prime Vex activated the chamber's central hologram, displaying the human home system in 3-dimensional detail. The small yellow star, unremarkable by galactic standards, sat at the edge of a spiral arm that most civilized species considered barely worth mapping. Earth, he read from the data stream. Population approximately 8 billion. Gravity slightly above standard. Atmosphere oxygen-nitrogen mix. They've achieved nuclear fission, basic computing, and have just launched their first crude faster-than-light probe. Their probe design is actually rather ingenious, admitted Counselor Tech Prime Zara, whose mechanical components whirred softly as she processed the data. Crude, yes, but they've independently developed several theoretical frameworks that took our ancestors millennia to discover. Their mathematics show particular promise. Mathematics mean nothing without wisdom, Vex dismissed with a gesture that caused his ceremonial robes to shimmer. Intelligence without experience is merely clever ignorance. How long did it take us to pacify the last promising species? The Draconian League surrendered after we destroyed a single asteroid in their outer system, recalled Counselor Thane. They understood the demonstration immediately. Exactly. One show of superior technology, and even the most aggressive species recognizes the futility of resistance. Vex's voice carried the weight of 10,000 years of galactic dominance. The humans will be no different. If anything, their fragmented political structure will make integration even simpler. We can negotiate with multiple factions, play them against each other if necessary. Counselor Brix's tentacles formed questioning spirals. The preliminary cultural analysis suggests they have an unusual relationship with conflict. Their historical records show almost continuous warfare among their own kind. Some projections indicate this might make them more resistant to external authority. Child's play, Vex waved dismissively. Internal conflict always weakens a species' ability to present unified resistance. The more they fight among themselves, the easier they are to control. We've seen this pattern in countless civilizations across the galaxy. The chamber fell silent as each counselor considered their own species' first encounter with the Galactic Council. Most had been overwhelmed by the sheer scope of galactic civilization, humbled by the realization that they were not alone and certainly not supreme. The wise ones had accepted guidance and protection. The foolish ones had resisted briefly, before inevitably submitting. I propose we follow standard first contact protocol, Vex announced, his voice carrying the authority of millennia. Send an ambassador to establish formal relations, assess their technological capabilities, identify their leadership structures, and present them with the choice: integration under our guidance or isolation until they achieve proper maturity. And if they choose isolation? Asked Counselor Zara, though her mechanical voice suggested she already knew the answer. Then we ensure their isolation is complete, Vex replied. A few destroyed ships attempting to leave their system. Perhaps a disabled satellite network. Nothing too harsh, just enough to demonstrate the consequences of choosing unwisely. Eventually, hunger for the stars will drive them to accept our terms. The Council murmured approval. It was a time-tested approach, refined over eons of expanding galactic civilization. Order through strength, peace through submission, progress through guidance from those who had already walked the path to stellar maturity. As the session concluded, and representatives began filing out through dimensional gateways back to their home worlds, none noticed the slight flicker in the chamber's quantum sensors. Deep in space, beyond the edge of the galaxy, something small and determined had just activated a scanning array far more sophisticated than any crude probe had a right to possess. The humans were coming, and they were already watching. Ambassador. Krell adjusted his ceremonial sash as the transport ship Dominion's Grace slipped into the outer reaches of the human solar system. The sleek vessel, a testament to 10 millennia of refined engineering, made no attempt at stealth. Its arrival was meant to awe, to demonstrate the vast gulf between human achievement and true galactic civilization. Maintain standard approach. Vector, Krell commanded his pilot, a young Tharn whose nervousness was evident in the rapid flutter of his gill slits. Full power signature display. I want their primitive sensors to register our technological superiority from the moment we enter their detection range. The bridge hummed with efficient activity as junior diplomats reviewed first contact protocols, and xenobiologists analyzed the latest intelligence on human physiology and culture. Everything proceeded according to the carefully choreographed dance that had brought hundreds of species into the galactic fold. Sir, the communications officer reported, we're receiving multiple transmission attempts from the human vessels approaching our position. They're using electromagnetic radiation across several frequency bands. Quite enthusiastic in their attempts at communication. Krell's dorsal spines rippled with amusement. Of course they are. Let them broadcast their primitive signals for another few moments. Anticipation will make our eventual response all the more impressive. Through the view screen, he watched 3 human vessels approaching in what their military probably considered a defensive formation. The ships were indeed crude by galactic standards. Metal hulls studded with obvious thruster assemblies, bristling with what appeared to be kinetic projectile weapons. Charmingly primitive, like watching children play with sticks and stones. Now, Krell decided, open communications, full translation matrix. Let's give them their first taste of true civilization. The main screen shimmered as the quantum communication array established contact. 3 human faces appeared, their expressions carefully neutral, but failing to hide their underlying tension. Krell noted their bilateral symmetry, the mobile facial features that would make emotional manipulation quite straightforward, and the obvious differences in pigmentation and bone structure that suggested a species still dealing with tribal divisions. Greetings, Krell began, his voice automatically translated into several human languages simultaneously. I am Ambassador Krell of the Galactic Council, representing over 15,000 worlds and 47 species in this galaxy. We welcome humanity to the greater community of stellar civilizations. The central human figure, an older male with graying hair and sharp eyes, responded with admirable composure. I'm Admiral Kane, representing the United Earth Defense Coalition. We had theorized about the possibility of other intelligent life, but to have contact established so dramatically, he paused, gathering himself. We're honored by your presence, Ambassador. Your honor is noted and appreciated, Krell replied smoothly. We have observed your species' recent achievement of faster-than-light travel. It is always gratifying to witness a young race take its first steps toward true civilization. One of the other humans, a woman with tactical insignia, leaned forward slightly. Young race? How many other species are part of this Galactic Council? Currently, we guide the development of 47 species across several thousand systems, Krell explained with practiced patience. Each contributes according to their capabilities, receives protection according to their needs, and benefits from the accumulated wisdom of those who have walked the path of stellar evolution longer. Admiral Kane's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. Guide their development? And what form does this guidance typically take? Each species integrates according to its unique strengths, Krell deflected smoothly. Some provide raw materials. Others contribute specialized technologies. Still others offer particular cultural insights. The Council ensures that resources are distributed efficiently and that conflicts between species are resolved peacefully. And if a species prefers to develop independently? The tactical officer asked, her tone carefully neutral. Krell's expression remained pleasant, but his dorsal spine stiffened slightly. Direct challenges were unusual at this stage of first contact. Most species were either too overwhelmed or too eager for galactic knowledge to ask such pointed questions immediately. Independence is, of course, respected, he replied carefully. However, the galaxy can be dangerous for unprepared civilizations. Pirates, rogue artificial intelligences, stellar phenomena that require coordinated response. The Council's protection has proven invaluable to developing species. Protection, Admiral Kane repeated slowly. And the cost of this protection? There is no cost, Krell said, which was technically true. Only contribution proportionate to ability. A mining world contributes raw materials. A research world contributes scientific advancement. A military world contributes security services, each according to their strengths. The third human, who had remained silent, finally spoke. His voice carried a different accent, and his uniform bore markings Krell didn't recognize. And, if our strength is simply being left alone? This was moving away from the script. First, contact usually involved more awe, more questions about galactic civilization, more eagerness to learn about technologies and wonders beyond their imagination. These humans seemed almost suspicious. I understand your caution, Krell said, deploying his most reassuring diplomatic tone. It is natural for a young species to feel overwhelmed by the scope of galactic civilization. Perhaps it would be helpful if I demonstrated some of the benefits of Council membership. Without waiting for a response, he activated his personal holo projector. The space between the ships filled with a three-dimensional map of the galaxy, highlighting Council territories, trade routes, and the interconnected web of civilization that spanned hundreds of thousands of light-years. Imagine, he continued, your species contributing to this grand tapestry. Human ingenuity channeled toward the betterment of all sapient life. Your world's resources ensuring prosperity for countless billions across the galaxy. Admiral Kane studied the display with professional interest. Impressive. And I assume non-member species are excluded from this prosperity? Not excluded, Krell corrected. Simply, not yet ready to participate. The galaxy has learned through hard experience that premature integration can be catastrophic for unprepared species. Hard experience, the tactical officer repeated. Could you elaborate? Krell's patience began to fray slightly. These humans were asking all the wrong questions, showing none of the appropriate deference or wonder. Their focus on potential downsides rather than obvious benefits suggested a troubling degree of cynicism for such a young species. Perhaps, he said with calculated authority, it would be more productive to continue this discussion in a more formal setting. I invite representatives of your leadership to visit our regional capital, where you can witness firsthand the benefits of galactic civilization. The three humans exchanged glances, some form of silent communication passing between them. Finally, Admiral Kane nodded. We appreciate the invitation, Ambassador. We'll need time to consult with our governments and prepare a proper delegation. Of course. Take all the time you need. The Council is patient with developing species. But, as the connection closed and the human ships began withdrawing, Krell felt a nagging uncertainty. In his experience, species either immediately submitted to obvious superiority or made futile aggressive gestures that were easily crushed. These humans had done neither. They had simply evaluated. That was new. And in Krell's extensive experience, new was rarely good. 3 months had passed since first contact, and Counselor Prime Vex's patience was wearing thin. The massive view screen in the Council's war room displayed the human solar system, now marked with red indicators showing increased military activity and what appeared to be rapid construction of defensive installations. They've declined our invitation to visit the regional capital, Ambassador Krell reported, his usual diplomatic composure strained. They've also refused to allow inspection of their faster-than-light capabilities, claiming security concerns regarding proprietary technology. Counselor Brix's tentacles writhed with agitation. Security concerns? What could they possibly have that would interest us technologically? Their most advanced weapons are barely beyond chemical propulsion. That's just it, Krell continued, activating a series of holographic displays. Our deep space surveillance has detected several anomalies. They're building something in their outer system, using construction techniques we don't recognize. And their defensive preparations suggest they're expecting conflict. Counselor Prime Vex studied the tactical readouts with growing irritation. Expecting conflict? With whom? We've offered them guidance, protection, integration into the greatest civilization the galaxy has ever known. What rational species prepares for war in response to such an offer? Perhaps, suggested Counselor Grim, his gravelly voice carrying a note of dark satisfaction, it's time for a more direct demonstration of Council authority. The Nexian horde responded similarly at first. All bluster and defensive posturing. One decisive action brought them into line. The chamber fell silent as the Council considered their options. Standard protocol called for patience, allowing primitive species time to overcome their initial fear and suspicion. But the humans weren't showing fear. If anything, their behavior suggested they were treating the Galactic Council as a potential threat rather than saviors. Their mining colony in the asteroid belt, Counselor Tech Prime Zara announced, her mechanical components whirring as she processed intelligence data. Designation, Ceres Station. Population approximately 10,000. Minimal defensive capabilities. It would serve as an ideal demonstration target. Not destruction, Vex clarified quickly. We're not savages. A surgical strike to disable their industrial capabilities, followed by immediate humanitarian aid. They'll see our restraint, our mercy, and understand that cooperation is preferable to resistance. Ambassador Krell shifted uncomfortably. Prime Vex, I should mention that their communications traffic has increased dramatically in recent weeks. They appear to have established some form of interplanetary communication network. Any action we take will be observed by their entire species. Excellent, Vex replied with satisfaction. The more witnesses to our demonstration of power and subsequent mercy, the more effective the lesson will be. The decision was made with the casual authority of a civilization that had never known true defeat. Battle Group 7, consisting of 3 advanced cruisers and their escort fighters, was dispatched to the human system with orders to disable the mining colony's industrial facilities and accept their immediate surrender. Fleet Commander Torvin had conducted similar operations dozens of times throughout his career. Young species needed to understand their place in the galactic hierarchy, and a precisely calibrated show of force invariably provided the necessary education. As his ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the asteroid belt, he felt the familiar confidence of overwhelming technological superiority. Target acquired, his tactical officer reported. Ceres Station bearing 27 Mark IV. Large industrial facility built into a rotating asteroid. Population centers clearly visible, along with mining and processing equipment. Are they attempting to communicate? Torvin asked. Multiple transmission attempts across all standard frequencies, sir. Standard surrender protocols, requests for negotiation, emergency evacuation procedures. Nothing unexpected. Through the main viewer, Ceres Station appeared as a magnificent example of human engineering adapted to their limitations. The entire asteroid had been hollowed out and restructured, with massive rotating sections providing artificial gravity, and extensive industrial complexes extracting valuable minerals. For a species barely 3 centuries old, it was actually quite impressive. Begin the demonstration, Torvin commanded. Precision strikes on industrial targets only. Disable their mining lasers, their processing facilities, their power generation. Avoid civilian areas entirely. We want surrender, not slaughter. The Council's weapons were marvels of controlled destruction. Particle beams that could slice through metal without thermal bloom, electromagnetic pulses that disabled electronics without harming organic tissue, gravity manipulators that could tear apart machinery while leaving surrounding structures intact. The attack began exactly as planned. Ceres Station's industrial sector erupted in carefully controlled explosions, as mining equipment, processing plants, and power generators were systematically neutralized. Within minutes, The colony's ability to function as an industrial facility had been completely eliminated. Receiving surrender transmission, the communications officer reported. But something was wrong. Instead of the expected panic and immediate capitulation, the transmission that came through was calm, almost conversational. Council vessels, this is Station Commander Lisa Park. We have received your demonstration of technological superiority. Our industrial facilities are disabled. Our defensive capabilities eliminated. We are prepared to discuss terms for evacuation of our civilian population. Torvin blinked in surprise. The human commander sounded almost resigned, not terrified, not pleading, just professionally acknowledging the situation. This is Fleet Commander Torvin, he responded. We have no intention of harming civilians. Surrender your facility and accept Council authority, and we will provide immediate humanitarian assistance. Commander Torvin, I appreciate your restraint regarding civilian casualties. However, I'm not authorized to surrender Earth assets to an external authority. I can arrange for civilian evacuation, but the facility itself remains under Earth jurisdiction until my government determines otherwise. This wasn't how these encounters were supposed to proceed. Previous species either surrendered immediately or made futile aggressive gestures. They didn't calmly negotiate while their infrastructure burned around them. Commander Park, Torvin said carefully, you seem to misunderstand your situation. Your weapons cannot harm our vessels. Your technology cannot match our capabilities. Continued resistance will only result in unnecessary suffering. I understand the situation perfectly, Commander. You have superior technology and firepower. You can destroy our facilities and eliminate our defensive capabilities. But you cannot compel political surrender without authorization from Earth Command. And if Earth Command refuses to provide such authorization? There was a brief pause. Then Commander Park's voice returned, still maddeningly calm. Then I suppose we'll find out what happens next. As if summoned by her words, Fleet Commander Torvin's tactical display exploded with new contacts. Dozens of small craft were emerging from concealed positions throughout the asteroid belt, moving in coordinated attack formations toward his battle group. The humans, incredibly, were choosing to fight back. Fleet Commander Torvin stared at his tactical display in disbelief. 43 small craft were accelerating toward his battle group from positions scattered throughout the asteroid belt. Their emission signatures unlike anything in the Council's extensive database of known vessel types. Analysis, he snapped. To his tactical officer. Unknown configuration, sir. They appear to be modified mining and transport vessels, but the energy signatures are unusual. I'm detecting massive electromagnetic buildup consistent with directed energy weapons, but the power output seems impossible for craft of that size. Impossible how? Sir, they're showing power-to-mass ratios that would require either antimatter reactors or controlled fusion systems far beyond what we've observed in their technology base. Either our intelligence was dramatically wrong, or the tactical officer's words were cut off as the lead human craft opened fire. What emerged wasn't the crude kinetic projectiles or primitive energy beams they'd expected, but a coherent stream of accelerated particles that struck Torvin's flagship with the force of a small star. The ship's shields, designed to deflect the most advanced weapons known to galactic civilization, held for exactly 3 seconds before catastrophic failure. Emergency klaxons screamed as secondary systems attempted to compensate for the massive power drain. Evasive maneuvers, Torvin commanded, but the human craft had already anticipated his response. They moved with a coordination that suggested either advanced artificial intelligence or a level of tactical communication the Council had never encountered in a primitive species. Sir, his communications officer called out over the chaos, I'm receiving a transmission from the lead human vessel. Put it through. The face that appeared on screen belonged to a young human female, her expression focused, but not hostile. Council vessels, this is Captain Maya Singh of the Earth Defense Force. You have committed an act of war against civilian targets. Withdraw from this system immediately, or we will continue to defend our territory. Captain Singh, Torvin replied, struggling to maintain diplomatic composure while his ship shuddered under continued human fire. You cannot win this engagement. Our technology is centuries ahead of yours. Surrender now, and I guarantee the safety of your crews. Commander Torvin, Singh responded, and there was something in her voice that made his dorsal spines prickle with unease. I think you're operating under some false assumptions about our capabilities. As if to punctuate her statement, the human craft suddenly changed their attack pattern. Instead of maintaining the direct assault, they split into 3 groups, each employing entirely different tactical approaches. One group engaged in high-speed strafing runs using weapons that seemed to phase through Council shields. Another began laying down synchronized fire patterns that created cascading energy feedback loops. And the third simply vanished from sensors entirely. "Where did Group 3 go?" Torvin demanded. "Unknown, sir. They're not showing up on any of our detection systems. It's as if they've—" The answer came as his second ship, the heavy cruiser Eternal Victory, suddenly erupted in a series of precisely targeted explosions. The human craft had somehow achieved perfect stealth and were conducting surgical strikes on critical systems. "How are they doing this?" Torvin asked, no longer trying to hide his alarm. "Sir," his science officer called out, her voice tight with confusion. "I'm analyzing the weapons signatures. These aren't just modified human technologies. They're incorporating principles from at least 6 different Council member species, somehow integrated into a unified system that's more effective than any individual component." The tactical display showed a battle that should have been impossible. Council ships, each individually capable of reducing a planet to rubble, were being systematically dismantled by craft that shouldn't have been able to scratch their paint. The humans weren't just fighting. They were demonstrating a level of technological adaptation that defied everything the Council thought they knew about species development. "Captain Singh," Torvin tried again, "how did you develop these capabilities? So quickly?" "Our intelligence indicated your technology level was centuries behind ours." Singh's expression was grim, but not unfriendly. "Commander, did you really think we'd make first contact without being prepared? We've been monitoring your communications for months, analyzing your technology, studying your tactics. Every species in your Council broadcasts their technical specifications on open channels, assuming no one else could understand or replicate them. That's impossible. The complexity alone—" "You're thinking like a species that's had the same technology for millennia," Singh interrupted. "We're humans. We've been adapting, improving, and weaponizing everything we encounter for our entire existence. Give us 3 months with your technology, and we'll show you applications you never considered." To prove her point, the human craft suddenly shifted to an entirely new attack pattern. They began using the Council's own gravity manipulation technology, but instead of employing it as the Council did, for propulsion and shield generation, they were using it to create localized space-time distortions that rendered Council weapons completely ineffective. "They're using our own technology against us," Torvin's tactical officer reported with something approaching awe. "But they're using it in ways that violate every standard application we've developed." "Not violate," corrected his science officer. "Improve. They've taken our gravity manipulators and found applications we never considered. They're treating our advanced technology like raw materials to be improved upon." The battle was effectively over. 2 of Torvin's 3 ships were crippled, their crews unharmed but their vessels completely disabled. The humans had demonstrated not just the ability to fight back, but to do so using superior versions of the Council's own technology. "Commander Torvin," Captain Singh called out, "we're prepared to provide assistance to your crews and safe passage out of our system. But I need you to understand something very clearly." "What's that, Captain?" "This was a defensive action using improvised equipment and jury-rigged modifications. You attacked a mining colony with 3 advanced warships and barely escaped with your lives." Her expression was deadly serious. "We are not the primitive species you thought we were, and if the Council continues to treat us as one, you're going to discover exactly how much you've underestimated humanity." As Fleet Commander Torvin authorized the retreat and accepted human assistance for his damaged vessels, he realized that everything the Council thought they knew about human capabilities had been catastrophically wrong. These weren't primitive barbarians to be easily controlled. They were something far more dangerous, a species that could take any technology, any tactic, any advantage, and turn it into something better. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were evolving in real time, and the galaxy was about to learn what that meant. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in unprecedented haste, representatives materializing through dimensional gateways with expressions ranging from confusion to outright alarm. Counselor Prime Vex stood before the assembled, delegates, his usual composure replaced by barely controlled agitation. "The human situation has escalated beyond our initial projections," he began, activating the central hologram to display the aftermath of the Ceres Station incident. "Fleet, Commander Torvin's battle group suffered complete tactical defeat against what we had classified as a primitive species." Counselor Thane's crystalline form pulsed with disbelief. "Complete defeat? Against 43 modified mining craft? This is impossible." "The impossible seems to be humanity's specialty," Vex replied grimly. "Our analysis of the engagement reveals that they somehow reverse-engineered and improved upon our own technology in a matter of months. They took gravity manipulation systems that required us millennia to develop and found applications we never considered." Ambassador Krell stepped forward, his diplomatic bearing shaken. "Prime Vex, there's more. Since the engagement, we've detected massive industrial expansion throughout the human system. They're not just rebuilding Ceres Station, they're constructing something far more extensive. Our long-range sensors indicate at least 40 new installations of unknown purpose. More concerning," added Counselor Tech Prime Zara, her mechanical components whirring with stress-induced overactivity, "is the communications traffic we've intercepted. The humans appear to be sharing technical data across their entire species, in real time. Every technological advancement, every tactical innovation, every piece of captured Council technology is being analyzed and distributed to their entire civilization within days." The chamber erupted in concerned murmurs. No known species had ever demonstrated such rapid technological dissemination. Most civilizations jealously guarded their advances, allowing gradual trickle-down over generations. Counselor Grimm's voice rumbled ominously. "They're treating technological development like warfare itself. Total mobilization, total information sharing, total adaptation. It's unprecedented." "What's our current threat assessment?" asked Counselor Brix, her tentacles forming anxious knots. Vex activated a new display, showing tactical projections. "If they continue advancing at their current rate, they'll achieve technological parity with Council systems within 6 months. Within 2 years, they may exceed our capabilities in several key areas." The silence that followed was deafening. For 10,000 years, the Council had maintained absolute technological superiority over every species they encountered. The concept of being surpassed by a civilization barely 3 centuries old was almost incomprehensible. "There's something else," Krell continued reluctantly. "We've detected similar activities in systems adjacent to human space. Species that have had no direct contact with humanity are beginning to ask questions about Council authority." "Questions?" Vex's voice carried a dangerous edge. "The Draconian League has requested detailed analysis of the Ceres Station engagement. They want to understand how a primitive species defeated advanced Council vessels. The Valdorian remnants are demanding to review their client state agreements. Even some of our core member species are expressing curiosity about human tactics." "Counselor." Thane's crystalline form flickered with alarm. "They're seeing opportunity where they should see threat. If other species begin to believe Council dominance can be challenged, then we face potential revolt across multiple systems," Vex finished. "The humans haven't just defeated a Council battle group. They've shattered the perception of our invincibility." Reports began flooding in from across Council space. On Nexia, Prime, former military leaders were studying leaked footage of the human engagement, analyzing tactics that had proved effective against Council technology. The Valdorian industrial complexes were operating at increased capacity, ostensibly for routine production, but with resource allocation patterns that suggested weapons manufacturing. Most disturbing were the intelligence reports from the Outer Rim territories. Species that had accepted Council guidance centuries ago were beginning to question why their technological development had been restricted, why they'd been assigned specific roles in galactic civilization, why advancement beyond their designated function had been discouraged. "The humans have done something we never anticipated," admitted Counselor Tech Prime Zara. "They've demonstrated that rapid technological advancement is possible, that species aren't locked into predetermined development paths, that Council technology can be not just matched, but exceeded. They've given the galaxy hope," Counselor Brix added, her tentacles writhing with realization. "For the first time in millennia, species are seeing an alternative to perpetual subordination." The chamber's atmosphere grew increasingly tense as the full implications became clear. The Council's authority had always rested on the assumption that they represented the pinnacle of possible development, that other species needed their guidance to reach their potential. The humans had shattered that assumption in a single engagement. Recommendations? Vex asked his assembled counselors. Military intervention, Grimm suggested immediately. Deploy Battle Fleet Alpha. Demonstrate that the Ceres Station incident was an anomaly. Show the galaxy that Council authority remains absolute. And if we fail again? Thane asked pointedly. We've already shown that our technology can be defeated. Another failure would trigger galaxy-wide rebellion. Negotiation, proposed Krell. Offer the humans full Council membership, equal status, access to all our technological resources. Bring them into the fold before they become a rallying point for dissent. With what guarantee they won't simply use Council membership to further advance their capabilities? Zara countered. Every piece of technology we share with them will be improved and potentially used against us. As the debate continued, none of the counselors noticed the subtle interference patterns in their quantum communication networks. Deep in space, human monitoring stations were intercepting and analyzing every word, every plan, every strategic consideration. The humans were still learning, still adapting, still preparing, and with each passing moment, they were becoming something the galaxy had never seen before. A species that treated impossible challenges not as barriers to be accepted, but as problems to be solved. The Council had spent 10,000 years believing they were the apex of galactic civilization. They were about to discover that evolution never stops, and sometimes it produces results that reshape everything. Fear was spreading through the galaxy, but it wasn't the fear of human aggression. It was the fear of human potential, and the growing realization that humanity might represent not just a threat to Council authority, but the next step in galactic evolution itself. The war that nobody wanted but everyone expected began 3 months later, when the Council's Second Fleet attempted to establish a blockade around the human solar system. The engagement lasted exactly 47 minutes and ended with the complete destruction or capture of 36 Council vessels without a single human casualty. This time, the entire galaxy was watching. Admiral Kane stood on the bridge of the newly commissioned Earthship Defiance, studying the tactical display with professional satisfaction. The vessel itself was a testament to human adaptability. Built using Council technology, but redesigned according to human principles of redundancy, modularity, and improvement under pressure. Report from Fleet Commander Martinez, his communications officer announced. The Council vessels have been secured. No casualties on either side, as ordered. They're requesting permission to retrieve their crews. Granted, Kane replied. And send our compliments to the Council commanders. They fought with honor, even when they realized they were outmatched. Through the main viewer, the captured Council ships hung in space like monuments to technological overconfidence. Each vessel was centuries more advanced than anything humanity had possessed a year ago, and yet human forces had systematically dismantled their defenses, using principles the Council had never considered. Admiral, his tactical officer called. Out. We're receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command. The Council has requested immediate ceasefire negotiations. Kane wasn't surprised. What had started as an attempt to reassert Council authority had instead demonstrated just how far human capabilities had advanced. The blockade hadn't lasted long enough to threaten Earth's supply lines, but it had lasted long enough to prove that humanity was no longer the primitive species the Council remembered. Put the Council transmission through, Kane ordered. Counselor Prime Vex appeared on the main screen, his usual arrogance replaced by something approaching respect. Admiral Kane, I believe we need to discuss terms for ending this misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, Prime Vex, Kane replied calmly. You attempted to blockade our system and impose your authority by force. We defended ourselves. The only question now is whether you're ready to negotiate as equals. Equals? Vex's dorsal spine stiffened reflexively. The Council has guided galactic civilization for 10 millennia. We have knowledge and experience that we've already surpassed in key areas, Kane interrupted. Prime Vex, your ships are hanging in our space, disabled by technology you don't understand, using principles you never developed. Your crews are alive because we chose restraint, not because you demonstrated superior capability. The silence, stretched between them, filled with the weight of 10,000 years of assumed superiority, colliding with the reality of human achievement. Finally, Vex spoke again, his voice carefully controlled. "What do you want?" Kane had been waiting for this question. Recognition of human sovereignty over our territory. An end to attempts at forced integration or control. And something else. We want to understand why you've kept the galaxy stagnant for so long. Stagnant? Vex's confusion seemed genuine. Prime Vex, we've analyzed your technology, your social structures, your historical records. Most council species have remained essentially unchanged for thousands of years. You've created a civilization based on maintaining the status quo, not advancing it. Kane activated his own display, showing comparative technological development curves. Every species you've integrated shows the same pattern. Rapid advancement until council contact, then gradual stagnation within assigned roles. You haven't been guiding galactic civilization. You've been preserving it in amber. Vex studied the data with growing unease. Stability requires structure. Unlimited advancement leads to chaos, conflict, extinction. We've seen species destroy themselves through uncontrolled technological development. And we've seen what happens when potential is artificially constrained, Kane countered. You've created a galaxy of specialists instead of innovators, followers. Instead of leaders, you've confused peace with stagnation. The accusation hit deeper than Kane had intended. Across council space, the same conversation was being repeated, as member species began to question why their development had plateaued, why their roles had remained static, why innovation had been discouraged in favor of maintaining existing patterns. Admiral Kane, Vex said slowly, you don't understand the responsibilities involved in managing galactic civilization. The delicate balance required to prevent warfare between species with conflicting interests. You're right, Kane admitted. We don't understand those responsibilities because we've never been given the chance to share them. You've made yourselves indispensable by ensuring no one else could develop the capabilities to contribute meaningfully to galactic governance. The implications were staggering. The Council hadn't just maintained control through superior technology, they'd maintained it by ensuring other species remained dependent on their guidance, never developing beyond their assigned functions. What happened to the species that refused integration? Kane asked quietly. Vex's silence was answer enough. How many, Prime Vex? How many species chose independence and were eliminated or isolated until they accepted subordination? We are not conquerors, Vex protested. We offer guidance, protection, opportunity for advancement within the greater galactic community. On your terms. In roles you define. With limitations you impose. Kane's voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath it. You've created a galaxy where advancement is rationed, potential is managed, and innovation is controlled. You call it civilization. We call it imprisonment. The transmission continued for hours, with representatives from across human space, participating in what amounted to the first honest dialogue between the Council and a species they couldn't control. As the conversation progressed, a fundamental truth emerged that neither side had fully understood before. Humanity wasn't just technologically different from other species, they were philosophically different. Where the Council saw necessary structure, humans saw artificial constraints. Where the Council saw dangerous instability, humans saw evolutionary potential. Admiral Kane, Vex finally asked, what do you propose? If the Council's model of civilization is flawed, what would you suggest as an alternative? Kane smiled, and for the first time in the conversation, it was a genuinely warm expression. That's not for us to decide alone, Prime Vex. That's for every species in the galaxy to determine together, as equals, as partners in whatever comes next. The conversation ended without formal agreements, but with something more valuable: understanding. The Council finally comprehended that humanity represented not just a challenge to their authority, but a challenge to their fundamental assumptions about civilization itself. And across the galaxy, species that had accepted their limitations for millennia began to wonder what they might accomplish if those limitations were removed. The age of Council dominance was ending. What would replace it remained to be seen, but for the first time in 10,000 years, the galaxy was evolving again. 6 months after the failed blockade, the Galactic Council chambers had been redesigned to accommodate new participants. Where, once only 47 species had sat in carefully arranged hierarchy based on age and perceived wisdom, now over 200 representatives gathered in a circular configuration that emphasized equality over precedence. Admiral Kane entered the chamber not as a supplicant seeking council approval, but as Earth's chosen representative to what was being called the Galactic Convention, a forum for determining humanity's role in galactic civilization, and, more importantly, what that civilization should become. Counselor Prime Vex, his title, now more ceremonial than authoritative, approached with an expression Kane had learned to recognize as cautious respect. Admiral Kane, I trust your journey from Earth was comfortable. Very much so, thanks to the new drive systems your engineers helped us refine, Kane replied diplomatically. The technology exchange programs had proven mutually beneficial. Human innovation combined with council knowledge producing advances neither could have achieved alone. Indeed, our technical teams continue to be impressed by human applications of established technologies. Vex's admission carried the weight of his species' pride. Your people seem to treat every technological limitation as a challenge to be overcome, rather than a boundary to be respected. Kane chuckled. Guilty as charged. We've never been very good at accepting impossible as a final answer. Around them, the chamber buzzed with unprecedented activity. Species that had maintained the same basic technologies for millennia were sharing innovations developed in just the past few months. The Draconian League had revolutionized their industrial processes using human-inspired modular design. The Valdorians had developed new art forms combining their crystalline growth techniques with human concepts of dynamic aesthetics. Even the ancient Korthak were experimenting with governmental structures that incorporated human ideas about distributed decision-making. The galaxy has changed more in the past year than in the previous 1,000, observed Counselor Tech Prime Zara, joining their conversation. Her mechanical components now included several human-designed improvements that had increased her processing capabilities by orders of magnitude. Change at this velocity is exhilarating and terrifying simultaneously. Change is never comfortable, Kane agreed. But stagnation is death. A civilization that stops growing starts dying, even if it takes millennia to notice. Ambassador, Krell approached with a delegation of younger council species, civilizations that had achieved spaceflight after the original council formation and had thus never known the independence of technological self-determination. Their expressions showed a mixture of excitement and uncertainty that Kane found familiar. Admiral Kane, Krell began, the Neoteric Alliance would like to propose joint research initiatives in several fields we've never been permitted to explore independently. Permitted by whom? Kane asked, though he knew the answer. By us, Vex admitted quietly. We believed that unrestricted research by younger species would lead to dangerous instabilities. We were overly cautious. Overly controlling, corrected. Counselor Thane, her crystalline form flickering with what Kane had learned was embarrassment among her people. We convinced ourselves that managing galactic civilization required managing every aspect of member species development. We were wrong. The admission rippled through nearby conversations as representatives from dozens of species paused to listen. For 10,000 years, the Council's authority had been absolute and unquestioned. To hear Council members acknowledge their mistakes publicly was unprecedented. The question now, Kane said carefully, is what we build to replace the old system. We can't just remove restrictions and hope for the best. The galaxy needs structure, coordination, cooperation, but it also needs freedom to grow, to change, to become something better than what it is. You have proposals? Asked Grimm, the massive counselor's gravelly voice carrying genuine curiosity, rather than its former dismissive authority. Kane activated a portable holoprojector, displaying a complex organizational chart. We call it the Collaborative Development Initiative. Instead of a central authority determining each species' role, we create voluntary associations based on shared interests and complementary capabilities. The display showed interconnected networks of cooperation, research alliances, trade partnerships, cultural exchanges, and mutual defense agreements, all operating without a single controlling hierarchy. Species would be free to participate, or not, to contribute according to their interests and capabilities rather than assigned functions. Innovation would be shared freely, with credit and compensation determined by mutual agreement rather than imposed regulation. And conflicts between species? Vex asked. Competing interests? Resource disputes? Handled by voluntary arbitration? Systems, with humans willing to serve as neutral mediators, given our lack of established territorial claims. Kane smiled slightly. We're uniquely positioned to be impartial because we're too new to have old grudges with anyone. The proposal generated intense discussion. Species that had been assigned purely industrial roles expressed interest in research, opportunities. Civilizations restricted to cultural development wanted to explore engineering challenges. Military species showed curiosity about artistic endeavors they'd never been permitted to pursue. This level of chaos would have been unthinkable under the old system, observed Counselor Brix, her tentacles forming complex patterns of consideration. It's not chaos, Kane corrected. It's complexity. There's a difference. Chaos is random and destructive. Complexity is organized and creative. The old system confused simplicity with stability. As the discussions continued, representatives began forming spontaneous working groups to explore possibilities that had been forbidden for millennia. The chamber's atmosphere shifted from formal diplomatic protocol to something resembling an enormous research symposium. Admiral Kane, Vex said during a brief lull in the excitement, I must ask, how did your species develop this perspective? This assumption that limitations exist to be overcome rather than accepted? Kane considered the question carefully. I think it comes from our history, Prime Vex. We're a young species that's faced extinction multiple times, climate changes, resource depletion, wars, plagues, cosmic impacts. We learned early that survival required adaptation, innovation, the willingness to try solutions that seemed impossible. And when those solutions failed, we tried different impossible solutions until something worked. Kane's expression grew, thoughtful. Maybe that's what makes us different. We never learned to accept failure as final. Every setback was just information for the next attempt. Your species doesn't fear failure? We fear giving up more than we fear failing. Failure teaches. Giving up just ends things. The conversation was interrupted by an announcement that formal voting would begin on the proposed collaborative development initiative. As representatives took their positions, Kane realized that regardless of the outcome, something fundamental had already changed. The galaxy was no longer asking permission to grow. It was choosing its own future, with all the uncertainty and potential that choice entailed. The vote was overwhelmingly in favor of the new system, with only the oldest council species expressing reservations, and even they agreed to participate, on a trial basis. As the session concluded and representatives began planning for a future none of them could fully envision, Counselor Prime Vex approached Kane one final time. Admiral Kane, I believe I understand now why your species was never content with our initial offer of integration. Oh? Why's that? Because you weren't looking for a place in our civilization. You were looking for partners in building something better. Kane nodded. The galaxy is vast, Prime Vex. There's room for all of us to grow into whatever we're capable of becoming. We just needed to start growing again. As the delegates dispersed to their respective worlds, carrying news of the galaxy's transformation, humanity had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. They hadn't conquered the existing order. They had inspired it to evolve. The age of managed civilization was ending. The age of collaborative evolution had begun, and at its heart was a simple human truth. The only limitations that truly matter are the ones we accept. The galaxy was about to discover just how few limitations were actually necessary, and how much was possible when species were free to surprise themselves. Humanity's greatest gift to galactic civilization wasn't their technology or their tactics. It was their refusal to accept that anything was impossible if you were willing to work hard enough to make it possible. The stars had been waiting 10,000 years for someone to ask, what if we tried something different? Finally, someone had.